We are doing season 3 now. Welcome to Learning and Unlearning, and in this episode we discuss a very, very interesting topic. So we unpack masculinity, of how young urban Zimbabwean man navigates it along with an immigrant or as an immigrant in South Africa in particular. This episode is meant to look at how our guest, academic Gabriel Shamu, is a very good friend of ours. He's our boy.
Soon to be doctor.
Oh, soon to be a PhD.
Come on.
This man submitted his PhD. So, we have Gabriel on our platform right now, and we really want to find out how he navigates black masculinity as a young Zimbabwean male of the urban class in South Africa in itself, right? So as you know, our conversations are very free form, right? So we jump in at any point, at any time. You know what I mean? I just direct a question at Gabe. Bongani jumps in when he wants to. Dumi jumps in when he wants to. We have fun with it, right? Yeah. So Gabe, my brother, thank you very much for being here. How are you doing?
Good, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. It's an honor to be here. Just
awesome.
Me and the other guest list and the people you've had on, and I'm like, yo, pressure.
No.
Really, really happy to be here.
We've never had a PhD here, so so we're doing very well right now. Right now, we're fine. So, Gabriel, just in a general sense, right? This is a more very general question, right? Because ours is to understand masculinity in general. Right. What has informed your definition or your sense of manhood?
Tough question. That's tough. From the jump. A myriad of things. I think, first of all, to just start with my life. So I grew up in a family being the only male child.
Yes.
My father passed away when I was 7 months old, so didn't know him at all.
Wow. Okay.
And I have 2 older sisters and my mother. So understanding what masculinity was from their viewpoint initially.
Right.
When they did. And obviously they have a particular perspective of it.
Yes.
And with that, you pick up certain things, and that somewhat shifted when I went to boarding school. And then there's a completely different idea of manhood. And
Boarding school, like all boys boarding school.
All boys boarding school.
These are like a missionary school.
Not missionary, but like militaristic, like
Yes.
private militaristic. Like
In Zimbabwe.
Yeah, in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So,
Only
privileged to go to that school, but they have very different views of manhood and masculinity. It's like almost peak masculinity, where you don't show emotion, you don't show weakness, you don't show like sensitivity in any shape or form. That's a weakness, and once someone sees that, that's like how they get you, or that's when they target you, or you get bullied for, right? So you're almost putting on a performance of what kind of man you are, how much of a man you are, and that was counter to, I think, innately who I am, in a sense, because, to be honest, I'm a really sensitive dude. I cry.
Yeah. Hey, just like all of us on this podcast, bro. That's why we're here.
I speak on my emotions. I have a range of emotions other than anger.
Right.
So, I'm complex individual in that sense. So it's almost like growing up, I had to dumb that down to almost put on that performance of what was expected of me at the school, where you have to be good at sports, you have to be contribute in a way, So that informed manhood growing up in my teen years, and then obviously moving here to university. Then it's more unpacking what masculinity looks like here, and somewhat inheriting what masculinity looks like here in terms of being a black man, the history that you have, but it's your history, it's yours, but it's not mine, right? You still inherit that. You still find out about yourself and learn about yourself more. So I think with that, and just seeing the different kinds of men you get here, I think I was able to find out that you can be who you are in a sense of like, if you have emotions, sure, that's good. And I think just growing in in a society like this, I'm more assured of what manhood means to me and being okay with that. So in my understanding of it, just being accountable to your loved ones, you know, being caring, being open, honest, having peers and open conversations like this, but that's the kind of person I am. I try not to have like shallow friendships or relationships. It's just like, oh, how are you doing? Cool. Shut up. I'm just like, no, really, how are you doing? What's going on in your life?
Yeah, complex relationship, vulnerable relationships.
So yeah,
that's an interesting perspective on you know how we define manhood in South Africa. Because I think I think our takeaway has always been that it's a very fractured definition, right? Like I think this is something we've established really early on in our discussions. Is like class plays a huge variable in that, right?
Absolutely.
But I'm sorry to hijack the thing. But
No, please.
To what extent, Gabe, has your interface with living in South Africa being rooted in academia, do you think has like played a role in how you conceive of South African masculinity generally?
Can I add a bit of context on that? Because I think what I'm also starting to pick up on from the other interviews that we've done, because we've done masculinity across borders, there is a very common African male urban middle class identity where, for example, I have more in common with Gabriel and Shafiq in Accra than I do with some of my cousins.
And Faisal in the
and Faisal who lives in London. Some of my cousins here, I have way more in common with. That's my experience, the urban male black middle class. But there is the other variances of masculinity that I have to engage with, but I'm probably more comfortable here than I am in the rest. So that's the context that we've sort of picked up in some of our other interviews. So whilst unpacking, I don't know, the common identity that we share, how have you interacted with the other variances of masculinities in South Africa? Like my uncle.
right.
and a Noord taxi driver.
And a Noord.
I think it's been.
Oh, and please speak into the mic. I think, we have a weird thing.
I think it's been a journey of like
Thanks, Frank.
learning about myself. And initially, when I got here in like 2011, I wasn't really sure of who I was as a person, right? You're 18, just fresh out of high school.
It'd be weird if you were.
You know, and you're kind of molding yourself into what people wanted you to be, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I could pinpoint and be like, this is how I saw masculinity, and this is what I wanted it to be. Because at that point, I was so unsure of myself. I was just like, I just want to be liked, So I just want to fit in, because it's a new environment, new country.
And you're isolated.
Exactly. So I was just like being a comedian almost. And because of that, I guess I can't really answer directly that question as in like this is what I saw or I was trying to be. But from what I saw in terms of other men in the community, obviously there's so much trauma that South African men have been through, right?
Yeah.
And inherently, I don't think we were taught as much as we should have been in terms of the history and that kind of thing. And a lot of the things I learned were new to me when I got here, and I was like, geez, this happened? Because oftentimes in like predominantly white schools,
Yes.
talk about colonialism, but you're not taught like from the other perspective.
Oh yeah, dude.
You know,
The abuse endured by men.
and the same with apartheid. So it was understanding that, and it only took me a lot later. Like, okay, why are the men so guarded? Why are they so like flippant with certain things? Whether that's how they treat women. And obviously, that's a huge generalization.
Right.
Just in terms of traditions and families and that kind of thing.
And the temperament.
Yes.
In SA is a bit.
It's
Quick to violence, quick to conflict.
Right. You said it, not me.
But it's true.
It is.
So there was a lot of that, but it was understanding, of course, a lot of people have been through so much. Growing up in broken homes, broken families, being raised by their grandparents or without parents at all.
Yes.
So at first it was confusion. Like, why are they so different? It's just like a border away. But obviously, within that, there's just so much that happened that we didn't experience. Of course, we went through colonialism, but apartheid was just a whole nother
different.
What men went through here. And the ramifications are still happening to this day.
Right.
And that's going to continue for generations, because that stuff gets passed on. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's been very helpful. And, it really leads us very nicely to our next question, which is a little bit similar because you touched on it a little bit. Talk to us about, because you speak about some of the experiences that South African men have faced and how you've been able to reconcile those experiences with the way South African men behave and those kinds of things, right? Maybe speak to us about the differences that you've noticed, whether from an urban or rural perspective, whatever spectrum really, between black masculinity in Zimbabwe, you know, and in South Africa, right? And I'm wondering, you know, having been here since 2011, which is not that long ago, I'm wondering if that's been in tension with who you really are. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start with the differences. I think Zimbabwe is a very conservative society.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And obviously this doesn't apply to everyone, and my perspective is growing up middle class, going to predominantly white schools, so it's also a very privileged view, but you could apply the same kind of like traditional African male traits to Zimbabweans in that like look after your family, we're somewhat stoic, you know.
Okay.
With Zimbabweans, I think because we've been through so much economically, politically.
Yes, because there's also that trauma that I also want to speak about as well from a Zimbabwean perspective,
There's that kind of trauma, but oftentimes we didn't have the freedom of expression to be like, this is wrong, or we're going through it, you know?
Right.
You kind of just internalize that, and you know, we're awesome at doing that. It's what Zimbabweans are known for, you know? We're so...
You move.
Yeah, we move, you know, and try either make it happen somewhere else, or we try to make it happen in the confines that we find ourselves in, right? Right. That's always been the case with us. So I do see that in terms of the differences of how we react to injustice in terms of what happens in the country. Right?
Okay.
So there's always this rhetoric like, you guys must rise up and confront your government. Or what's going on.
Yeah, it's very flippant. It just comes from the air.
South Africa have had that. I think that you guys have had to do that, you know, to fight for the freedoms that you have. So you have been able to, and it's worked in a sense, right, to get your views across and that kind of thing.
Right.
With us,
Interesting.
we haven't had that freedom. We like protest movements and that kind of thing get suppressed really, really quickly. So
the military is still very, very powerful.
Disgruntled and pushing back. Oftentimes we're not as brave to do that. Maybe not brave may not be the right word, but
a military dictatorship is a military dictatorship.
Exactly. Precisely. It is what it is.
And I think that does lead into how we move as people. Where we'll rather, instead of confronting, we may be like, okay, let's just find a way somewhere else, you know. So we're not as confrontational, I'd say. In terms of the family, we try to do our best to have conservative values and keep the family nucleus together, but as with all families, you know, people step out, but it's not out there. People do things in silence. Like they refer to like men having other families, like a small house. You know?
Small house.
Whereas when I see people will be flippant here and be like, this is my girlfriend, but I have someone else here.
The fact that we have an entire TV show complex, like we are Jola and things like that. It's very flippant. It's very open.
That's casual.
I like the way you put it, Mohan. Show complex.
You know, it's like a military-industrial complex, but
that comes from urban migration.
You know, because you're right. Like the shame aspect is very different. Like in South Africa, I've noticed that for a lot of men, you know, we're very shameless men. I think in SA, we're very shameless about a lot of things. You leave your family, you cheat on your partner, we're incredibly shameless. But what I've learned from traveling across the continent, it's the opposite. Men do carry, there's a lot of shame if you do step away from your family. There's a lot of shame.
That's why you call it a small house.
Yeah, that's what.
It's in the corner.
So it's such an interesting term, like a small house, but you're euphemizing because you know that this. But sorry, carry on. It's the shamelessness for me that, you know,
stood out.
But
I think what describes it perfectly is the conversation I've seen on Twitter in terms of just like how how Zimbabwean men treat South African women, or why they date South African women. So
that chat.
Yeah, that chat probably describes it perfectly. Apparently, we go out of our way to make a woman feel good.
Okay.
Nicely, we like look after you. One example I saw was like, we treat women like an egg, like we don't break you, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're like really soft, right? Yeah. And we go out of our way to like woo you and date you, right? Whereas the perception of South African men is just like, if you're here, you're here, you know, but I may not be here tomorrow, you know, that kind of thing. Let's keep it moving, you know. So then there's that perception of, oh, it's about a Zim men treat South African women differently. And obviously that's a generalization, but those are the kind of conversations
Absolutely.
But there's truth in those generalizations.
can maybe explain it in a better way or give you a better picture.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And I think, you know, Gabe, it really leads me very nicely to this next question, because ultimately learning and unlearning is about the relationship between men and women.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. Right. And so what's interesting about our episode with Shafiq, our episode with Faisal, is that we've discovered that we all come from conservative families and conservative backgrounds, right? There's a level of conservatism that is associated with immigrating from a country. Like your home family and its roots and its values will still come behind you, right? There are specific family expectations, you know, that you come carrying within this environment, right?
If anything, there's an even more concerted effort to further entrench those roots because
Absolutely.
you don't have the surrounding ecosystem to be able to enforce that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So talk to me about some of like, you know, conservative family values, you know, that you grew up with that may or may not have been that progressive, right? You know, because that's the other thing about like conservative values, that sometimes they're not as progressive as we want them to be, right? And maybe like, you know, tension with that and the urban experience, especially the academic experience, where you have so much progressive language that you have to juggle all together,
Awesome question. I think what just came to mind is like, in terms of conservative values, I think as a country, because we're so conservative, things like the LGBTQ plus conversations, right?
Yeah.
Like when growing up, we didn't have those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
If people were of the LGBTQ plus, they were uniting or they weren't outwardly expressing and that kind of thing.
Right.
And when I came here, it was like a difference. And for the first time, you're experiencing and seeing people like that, right? So I can honestly admit, like, I had probably a lot of homophobia when I got here. Because I just didn't know. It was just pure ignorance. Pure ignorance. You know? And learning about people from those backgrounds and the experiences and that kind of thing, and unpacking that and unlearning and
yes.
Like, oh no, this just like, because there's always that perception, oh, it's a choice or that kind of thing. Those are conversations that are inbred.
Yes.
Societies like
yeah,
that.
it's a choice and it's a wrong choice. You chose
You're
wrong.
so far from God, and that's why you're that person, right? So it's unpacking that.
So I had a friend who came to visit, moved there from Dar es Salaam, and his father and grandfather in his first year, at the beginning of his first year, you know, helped him get settled. And he told me the story about how when they came to South Africa, because he's got brothers at Bishops, right?
Yes.
And his granddad saw gay men in Cape Town and wept. And I was like, they cried.
Damn.
Right? So it just like, it gives you a sense of just the extent of, And we have that in our own communities too.
Yeah,
right?
Our grandparents, uncles.
Exactly. Who perhaps might not navigate, who haven't been influenced by like urban South African manhood, right? But like it's
Absolutely.
So I think it was just unpacking that. You know, the manhood comes in a different form based on wherever you are and what country you're from, you know, and that there's beauty in different kinds of manhood, you know, as well. You know, that you don't have to be that hegemonic masculine man that's huge and doesn't show his emotions, you know, like butch guy and that kind of thing. And obviously, trying to unpack my manhood or understand it, I did push into those kind of things when I was like when I first got here, you know, because I was like, okay, maybe this is what I need to be.
Yes, just like that machismo element.
Yes, you try that.
There's that rugby culture here in South Africa.
And then you try to find something else. You're like, okay, let me treat women like shit because that's what I see.
Look, it's fine. It's a family show, but it's PG-13.
No, you're not the worst one, believe me.
Oh, really?
There's a leaderboard, and you're probably
you're fine.
That's one.
We're the worst ones.
He's the worst one. Stu's the worst one. Absolutely.
So pushing into that, and while all of that is happening, you're trying to figure out that in the real world, right?
Yeah.
Right.
In school, you're having these conversations and classes about the same kind of things, right? And that puts labels, names, phrases, and like jargon that you've never heard, but you're trying to come to terms with as well. So I guess it did benefit me in a way because I think I kind of consider myself starting at a disadvantage because there's just no exposure to that. There was nothing. It was I grew up, I would say, pretty sheltered in an environment that didn't cater for anything like that. Besides that masculine mold. And coming here, opening my eyes to like, oh, there's so much more. So much more, and we're so different and so nuanced. But there's beauty in that. There really is. And
can I ask a question? And Chance, you'll help me refine it, right? I think I'm finding that we're in a. I mean, South Africa has always been a very Afrophobic country, right? And I think there are a lot of. I mean, if you're going to like describe and define South Africa and South African men, obviously there's a propensity for violence conversation. We've had the conversation amongst ourselves about how we all have an inherent fear of one another, right? But Gabe, in defining, in sort of embodying masculinity in the ways you do, and like while also, you know, what sort of experiencing and undergoing a sort of like populist shift towards like, I mean, we've always been xenophobic, but now it's becoming even more socially acceptable to be xenophobic.
It's even politically tokenized.
Exactly.
And you get credibility.
Quick credibility. And you see even the ANC, which has always been sort of like a Pan-Africanist country. I am an African. Right? And you look at the recent policy conference and like, you know, the discussion points coming out of there. You have the ANC marching in the West Rand, sort of conflating the like rape and illegal immigration, which are two separate issues, right? And even where there's overlap, there's a sort of a rising sort of sentiment that South African men don't rape, right? But the point of the question is, in defining masculinity and embodying it in the way you have, how has that plus our propensity for violence as South African men, plus xenophobia and Afrophobia informed how, like, how you conceive of safety, well-being?
Yes, sure. Safety, well-being here. It boils down to that.
Gosh,
it's a safe space.
It is. I think I've been fortunate enough in a sense that when the xenophobic attacks or that rhetoric flares up, usually it's around about election time. So like, I used to crack jokes with a friend of mine like, oh, dude, elections are coming up.
Here we go.
We're gonna get blamed for everything, right? And that usually happens because people use that as campaign points, you know, like, oh, the foreigners are coming in, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Instead of taking accountability for crime intelligence failure. Instead of taking like
exactly. So it's a lot of that, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger. Like, dog, we're not the violent ones.
Sure.
So like trying to other ourselves from it, but at the same time, that understanding had to come in as well. Like, okay, why does the violence take place? Okay, that's because of your history, right? And then you speak about the government not really doing anything to combat that rhetoric. And then looking at it deeper and being like, oh, actually it benefits them if they have a finger to point at.
Absolutely. A scapegoat.
We become a scapegoat, right?
A population of people become a scapegoat.
And then amongst all of that, because the situation isn't great at home, you're still like, well, I don't feel safe, but I'd rather take my chances here. Because at the same time, I can do little jobs here and there, even though I can't get like permanent employment. It's probably more than other people would get back home, who are actually employed and have a contract and get a salary, you know. So, and these are the jokes I crack with like one friend who just finished his PhD as well, and we kind of like would speak about what goes on in the country, and it's just like, dude, we'll still take our chances here because regardless of what's going on, there's still so much opportunity in amongst all that's going on. So whether that's the violence, whether that's the xenophobia, whether that's the lack of opportunities, and obviously it's our country, so we can't be like, we demand, and that's not the case. But with the stuff that we have, we still can wiggle and make make something of ourselves.
But I guess also here you can buy your safety, right? Like
Or you just stay indoors, right? And I think the Viz community, because obviously you're going to Viz and sometimes you live close by, so the spillover doesn't take place usually. If you stayed at Viz, pretty safe.
Yep.
If you stayed in amongst around that area, Brum and that kind of thing,
Parktown, yeah.
So it's not like we were venturing off to the castle, because you stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, in the hood.
Even taking a taxi, dog.
Yes.
You almost stick out like a sore thumb, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that's worse with me because I sound white. And even when I speak vernac, it doesn't hit the same way.
Doesn't hit,
Yeah, you're not from there, So
suspicion.
Exactly. So, and that's just my experience. And obviously, you do get Zimbabweans who blend in a lot better. You get Ndebele people who blend in.
Speak Zulu
fluently. So in amongst all of that, I would still say I'd rather take my chances here.
Sure.
And that's just the situation.
Back
home,
And it's interesting because I'm not sure if you remember on Faisal's episode. So I know we keep mentioning him. So one of the episodes, his parents are from Uganda, moved to the UK. He was born there, and so he's like second generation basically. But he's he's British and obviously loves his country, loves London, all of that stuff. But one of the things he was talking about was his parents' decision to move from Uganda to the UK, I think was a similar consideration. We'd much rather take our chances here because here we know at least with overt racism. I mean, the UK has a lot of racism now, but in the 80s, you can imagine, So, but for them as well it was rather take our chances here. There's work opportunities, there's school, and our kid probably has a better shot growing up here than anywhere else. Because I remember in a chat that I had with Faisal, and I was telling him I'd like to study in the UK for like 2-3 years or whatever, and he was like, yeah, that's what my parents said, and then they stayed, and I was like, nah, but I love South Africa too much. He's like, that's what my parents said, and they stayed. But anyway, just the links are so interesting about you'd rather take your chances here despite all the considerations about safety and animosity. But I know you had something.
So yes, in fact, I was literally gonna bring that up. Literally gonna bring that up, and I'm gonna bring a question at the end of what he said. Right, because that affects our conception of provision as men. Right, because with it, which is a popular virtue and responsibility that we give ourselves as men, that our primary responsibility is to provide and protect. And part of it is if it means I'm moving to another country so I can optimize that, I will do that for the sake of my family and in future, right?
Even if it's for your prospective family.
Exactly, even if it's for a prospective family. Because Faisal, what didn't come with them from Uganda, he was born in the UK, right? And so,
but even just so I can do so I can patriarch properly, right?
Yes.
Go there and be better at it.
Yes. So how, not to say, not to kind of like throw the provision virtue at you like that, right? As if it's your thing, like I provide, but like, how has that affected that conversation for you? Because it's inherent in masculinity.
Of course.
Black masculinity.
Black masculinity,
I've been in conflict about that. Especially because of staying in academia so long, you do sacrifice
the ability
that
to
financial aspect.
Oh yeah, 100%. In fact, you pay. You pay to stay.
I have people who I went to school with, and they've maybe gone on to have 2 or 3 jobs, got a house, car, or apartment, car, that kind of thing, right? And there's that conflict. You're like, geez, I'm doing this. In my case, I was doing my PhD to stick around and buy myself more time here, and eventually try and make the transition to become a resident, right? With that, you're sacrificing that provision aspect. But in amongst that, you're still living, you're still trying to hopefully meet someone, build a family, build a relationship, and that kind of thing. But that whole provision aspect is still holding you back. And that's still, it's still to this day something I battle with, because
it's still a tension, my brother.
My rack. Together yet, and because of that, I can't make that next step in terms of starting a family and that kind of thing. So I'll give you an example. I think it must have been the second date I went with my current girlfriend, and I was putting out all the stops on the student budget. She stopped me and she was like, "Dude, what are you doing?"
Oh, that's so nice.
And she's like, need all the fancy shit that you're trying. Sorry, that's too.
Hey man, it's okay. PG-13.
Don't worry.
If it's 3, it becomes like 16 plus, 16L. 16
Episodes
LV.
like that anyway.
Yeah, you know.
So she's like, I don't need all that you're trying to do right now. Like doing the most, like taking me to these fancy places and that kind of thing. I don't really need that. I just want to know who you are as a person. Right? And that kind of took off the weight that like, yo, I need to provide. But obviously there's
Praise
still
God
that
for that.
conflict. That's like me as, like,
Internally.
yeah, I still need to get my act together so I can do things or give myself, just provide myself a foundation and
Yeah.
the future family that I want, right?
Do you get pressure from your family at home, not even necessarily to provide for them, but to start to assert your ability to provide as a man? Do you get that pressure from home or from any other quarters in society?
And I think I'm
That's
one
great.
of the
Yeah.
lucky ones. But I think I just applied that pressure on myself, like being the only boy in the family, and like
Yeah.
I can't be dependent on my mom. Bro. She's a single mom. Actually, you need to get your stuff together so you can look after yourself. And then for the last couple of years, I've been doing that. When the opportunity arises, then I can like send money home. But luckily, I'm privileged in the sense that all like whether it's my 2 sisters, they have partners and they're pretty like stable, and my mom as well. But it's a bit difficult in terms of my mom being still in Zimbabwe, and from time to time I help where I can, but no pressure really, no pressure from them, thankfully.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a lot more weight because there's pressure I have on myself.
Yeah.
I
Just meet your own needs.
yeah, meet my own needs, but also there's this thing about this narrative about Zimbabweans that we're high achieving, hardworking, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you carry that on your back as well.
I feel like in South Africa, we've basically turned Zimbabweans into like the Asians, what Asians are perceived as in America.
Exactly.
That's what we've done with you guys.
Exactly that.
But it's
It's-
also because statistically, I mean, if you look at best performing group of students at like on
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah,
law
yeah,
school, like Zimbabwean students are killing it.
Yeah.
No pressure, sorry.
I see it.
But that's what we've done.
So,
But that's what we've done.
Working
Exactly.
in the postgrad space at Wits as well, a lot of the PhD students and my peers were either Nigerian or Zimbabwean. It's just, and now you're seeing a steady climb of South Africans enrolling, which is good. But there's that pressure that you need to achieve, you need to succeed in whatever it is. And that's the case not just here but across the world. So there's been a lot of brain drain from Zim. And
Yes.
across the world,
Yes.
you
Yes.
find,
What it means.
There's the CEO of a company in the UK.
Yeah.
Oh, where's this guy from? Oh, he's Zimbabwe. Most of the time,
Oxford academics.
you know.
People in the UN.
Yeah.
You know.
IMF,
World Bank.
Yeah.
Like important
So
people.
there's that kind of pressure, whether that's familial or just the society you grew up in and just your country as well. You know. So if you say you're Zimbabwean, people are like, okay, what are you doing? You know, like what are your credentials to show? It's almost like that badge. Like,
Oh, man.
I'm high
Prove
achieving. Yeah.
Oh,
It's just,
man.
it is what it is.
Yeah. So look, from our side, you know, as in this part of the format, this is really pretty much the last question. But again, we keep throwing in comments whenever we need to and all those kinds of things, right? Again, for us, it still boils down to relationship between men and women, right? And so, you know, what I want to understand, I mean, in South Africa, we're faced with rape and femicide. That's the thing that's happening right now. I mean, we just recorded a future episode right now dealing with rape in particular, and it's harrowing.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to know, like in Zimbabwe, is there a similar crisis? You know, with regards to these really deep crimes that men commit? If so, is there a way of dealing with it? Is there discourse? Are there conversations? And I think lastly, really, what's the relationship between men and women back home? Yeah, maybe Bawani also wants to jump on there.
Literally,
Yes.
because going back to our common experience, urban black males, we all met at Wits, right? We're all in similar lecture halls and things like that. But as soon as I leave Wits, and not even Mpumalanga or Limpopo, I'm just the south of Joburg.
Yeah.
Automatically, it's a different environment where the M2, as soon as I get on the M1 south of the M2, none of the language I've learned on campus matters anymore.
Even exists.
Or even exists. And I remember during, you know, undergrad and honors, how how harrowing it is to go back just to the South and hang out with some people from the South and realize, well, hang on, the world's carrying on as is. Everything you problematize in academic circles doesn't matter 20 kilometers away. So I don't know if you had a similar experience where you go back home and you're like, damn, none of this language, what the hell?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of that. And I would say in terms of like the differences in the relationships between men and women in Zim, I would say acts of violent crime aren't the same there as compared to here.
Okay.
Like you were saying, there are a lot of harrowing cases that you hear about here, like what happened to a partner from a loved one and that kind of thing. We don't,
Right.
Maybe I don't hear of them or they're not as publicized in the media, but you don't have cases like that where you hear about femicide or these gruesome killings or murders that take place. They may happen as well. Right? No society is absolutely like utopian,
Right.
But in terms of the media latching onto that and it being widely expressed, I don't think that happens as much. But I'm sure the relations between men and women are as conservative as can be and like somewhat religious based as well. So like
right.
Man leads the home, that kind of thing. Women somewhat subservient to that, and we all have our normative roles to play, and that way that's where it sticks. Even with feminist rhetoric, I think oftentimes a lot of them are outliers, and they often have to come here. Like Zimbabwean feminists, they're the predominant ones at BITS actually.
Yes.
And that kind of thing.
Yes.
Been able to drop names, but yeah.
Drop those names so the kids can go read,
None are coming to mind right now, but still.
Panashe Chigumadzi is one.
Yes.
Yeah, Panashe.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
Shout out. Yeah.
But oftentimes, the space for that is probably like the fertile ground for that is probably more viable here than back home.
Right.
Just because of those like conservative values that I speak about.
Yeah.
So in terms of the relations, I do also think right now I heard there's a crisis of like teenage pregnancy and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So
a lot of it emanating from rape.
Statutory.
Yeah, so statutory rape. So kids, I think it was last year, between January and March, about 66,000 births were registered in Gauteng of children between something like 12 and 16 or 10 and 16 or something like that. 66,000 in 1 quarter of the year. And I mean, isn't that clear that there's so much rape happening in our societies? But yes, there's that. Yeah.
I think there's an issue regarding that. But I'll take that, and I wouldn't say violent crime as such.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I do think there may be a spike in that, just because of the social fabric changing because of the economic situation being
right. Please hop on that for a little bit, yeah, because that's where I don't want to make too much of an anthropological observation of South Africa because I'm not sure if I understand the full framework, right? But I think a large part of male violence in South Africa is economics, bro. And the disempowerment and your inability to access this thing that you think makes you a man, which is to provide. Exactly. And now as a result, you just throw your body at the woman so that's all you have left as a man, apparently. So I think that's a huge part of it. So please hop on that as a growing trend you're starting to see in Zimbabwean society.
Especially with the youth, there's been so much disenfranchisement just because of like you graduate uni and you go into a job market that's non-existent, right?
Yeah.
So then you sit around for so long, and with that you lose that pride or that like your confidence as a person takes a hit, right?
Right.
And you have nothing left but to say. Like
when there's dignity and purpose,
exactly.
And you don't have that.
Exactly, and that's taken from you, right? And you try and you're capable, you're educated, you're really bright, you have these ideas, but the environment is just not
conducive
to do that, So, first of all, it starts off as turning to drugs and alcohol. Like, there's a huge issue with that in terms of like people using the youth using cough syrup.
Oh yes, I saw a Vice documentary on that.
And apparently quitting codeine is sometimes as difficult as quitting heroin.
Yeah.
That's what on that Vice documentary.
On that Vice documentary as well.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
So like I was watching an interview where the guy was just describing, it's like, I have nothing to do, so I take the stuff and I kind of like zone out for hours on end, right? And a lot of people do that. Some people will resort to crime or other things, you know, to try and fill that void or that void of not being able to achieve or do anything with themselves with the skills that they have, you know. So I think that's something that'll probably be on the upscale in the future as well.
Yeah.
Because of the economic and political.
And we see that here, right? Like there's few things more dangerous than like an unoccupied population, but specifically an unoccupied youth, right? Especially where you know, like you're saying, these pressures exist to be able to, you know, meet the obligations and requirements of manhood to the extent that provision is necessary for them.
Yeah. I mean, 2/3 of youth in South Africa are unemployed. And
it makes you feel like we're heading towards a powder keg, right?
Exactly.
Where like the reality around gender-based violence, rape, and femicide worsens. While unemployment worsens.
Yeah, because I want to comment on that really because the last maybe out of the last 5 like femicide cases I've heard of, at least 3 of them were committed by students, right? So it's a student who would kill and mutilate their loved one there in the Eastern Cape, mutilate them and put their body parts in a bag, right? This guy is not even 25, right? It's another student in DUT, or I think was it Unizulu, who whipped out a gun and shot her right there. Unizulu, right? Whipped out a gun, shot her right there in res, and all those kinds of things, right? That's what. So, Kore, it's what's ironic about what you're saying about the fact that you know, feminist discourse, progressive discourse is the heart of it. Where this is the country where that's the heart of that progressive conversations, we're also the heart of the most heinous, barbaric, primal of crimes, you know, in the world, which is very much at odds with what we can say about masculinity in our rich language and all those kinds of things. But I think, you know, drawing towards, because at Learning and Unlearning, the big thing for us, Gabe, is to, you know, is a way forward, right? And I think there's something very interesting that you alluded to earlier, and I really want you to hop on that so that you can help us apply, you know, progressive notions of masculinity, right? You took us on a trajectory. You said, you know, you grew up with a healthy-ish sense of masculinity back home before you went to boarding school, right? Because you were raised by women, and so you could recognize women, appreciate women, and all those kinds of things. I don't think you were at odds with women at the time. Going to boarding school, military school, where it's peak masculinity, and it's about the domination of bodies. And you come to Wits, and now it's like all these conflicting ideologies around manhood are concerned. But, you know, you allude to a place where you became satisfied with who you were as a man, as a sensitive, vulnerable person, and all those kinds of things. When was that? When did that click? And how can we help men who are listening to this podcast get to that place? Because most of us are in the same trajectory.
I think I got to that place when I probably reached like my lowest of lows, you know?
Yeah.
Where I'm performing masculinity in the most toxic ways. So just moving around, treating women terribly, and thinking, oh, that's how I'm going to feel whole or confident in myself.
Right.
Because I think I've always grown up with, like, maybe not growing up without a father, I always felt like I was lacking in some sort of way, right? So because of that, I was trying to fill a void with whether that's success at school or women or trying to make money. I'm still working on that last time. But doing all those things and still being depressed.
So even when you're successful with the thing, it's like it's
still not fulfilling and filling that void, right?
Sure.
So obviously then had to go to therapy. It got that bad to where
important step.
Trying to do those things, like show up to school, was difficult, you know, just showing up for my friend was difficult. So thankfully I was supported by my family and close friends were like, yo, you need to go get some help. And having those conversations and just unpacking like where that stems from. So ultimately I just lacked confidence in myself and like, yeah, sure, I'm somewhat dumbing that down, but innately because of that, lack of confidence, I would seek out these things to try to fill that void, or
Right.
make myself feel better, whether
Right.
that's by having the prettiest woman on my arm, because I thought if people see me with her, then they think better of me. But ultimately, I'm still empty. I'm still a shell of myself, right?
Sure.
So hitting that low and figuring out, okay, you have these traits, you have these core values, you were raised by a woman. That is what it is, and you are who you are. You're sensitive. You know, you have to come to terms with that. You like to cry. You have to come to terms with that. Listen, you're just not the typical masculine normative man. You don't fit into that mold. You don't. And obviously, I was trying to shape myself in people I saw around, because I think oftentimes we do mold ourselves on our fathers, right?
Right.
Because of that, I'm trying to look for a different mold each time, and that's not working, and that kind of thing.
Right.
So
Damn.
eventually, just realizing like, this is the game you are here. This is
Sure.
what's important to you. Loyalty, honesty, like those generic things, but real fundamentals in terms of who I am as a person. And then someone pushing into those and being like, this is the people that do love you for who you are.
Sure.
Those things, you know? Yeah.
Really, really powerful. I'm gonna ask, Dumi also to give us like concluding thoughts as to some of the things that we could apply from the lessons that Gabe just mentioned right now, because I thought that was really powerful, and it was also really powerful in context. And I think that's a part of it. Understand your context, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate your context and apply these things according to who you are and where you come from. So Dumi, please give us closing thoughts, and Bongani right afterwards.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about what you just said now, right?
Yeah.
Understand your context, but also understand yourself, right? I think when you get to the point where, Frank, you mentioned this a few episodes ago about how there's the people in your life who are going to love who you are at your core, right? And I think when you can get to the point where you start to see the beauty in your complexities, the beauty, even in the beauty in the ways in which you don't meet that traditional masculine mold, when you start to see like the things about yourself that matter, because I think there's a men can do really, really terrifying things when we're insecure, when we have low self-esteem, and when we just don't feel, and when we're disempowered, right? I think for the most part, most of the harm we impose on women flows from those feelings, right? Of disempowerment, of insecurity, and all of those things. I think do the internal work of understanding how and why your core values and the things that define you at your core are important, right?
Yes.
Because you are important. And I think that's such a powerful takeaway, right? And I think it's internal work that very few of us do. Just because I think we're so ingrained in the idea that being loved is conditional, right?
Yes.
We did a whole episode about at what point we deserve love.
Yes.
But it's perhaps like deserving love is another conversation, but like the humanity is not linked to your ability to check boxes, right? And I think when you can get to a point where you've made progress and headway in that respect, you sort of find that like the other things are incidental, and
they come together.
Powerful point.
Sorry, you just mentioned something. Just the word insecure.
Yes, sure. Please.
And I'm gonna pivot. The show Insecure, for some reason, comes to mind when I heard that word.
Yes, of course.
Because for and the amazing work she's done. But I think one thing that she did so well that resonated with me is she showed Black men in ways that I don't think any other TV show has done.
Yes.
Where you have
Black men have black men like that.
Yeah, in such a broad spectrum where you have members of the LGBTQ, you have that normative hegemonic masculine man like that.
Because that's how we're always portrayed.
Right. But then you get someone who's somewhat sensitive, like initially Lawrence was going through it, he was depressed, he hadn't reached what he wanted to, he hadn't gotten to where he needed to be at that point, right? And he was having that internal conflict and that kind of thing. But you have such a broad spectrum of Black men, which I don't think I've ever seen. And weirdly enough, that made me come to terms with myself and be like, dude, you don't have to be phenomenal at sports.
It's really deep.
killing it with the women, making $1 million to just be a black man, right? Yeah. Just seeing that did so much for me in the sense that
you don't have to be an NBA player.
Exactly, that kind of thing, but it's a real thing because you don't see that, right? And like you try and mold yourself into what's on TV and that kind of thing, but oftentimes that's so limited in terms of who we are as black men. Yeah. You know? Yeah. We're either hypersexualized, hyper-physical, hyper-masculine, brawny, not really intelligent. That's how they describe us on like sports channels and that kind of thing. But we're so nuanced in how we live and our experiences that I think a lot more new media and like platforms like this show the spectrum of us and who we are and that we feel and that we can have nuanced conversations and that kind of thing, which is so important.
Yeah. Right.
No, I think on my side, and as far as application is concerned, one of the things that this theme has really done for all of us is just building bridges across cultures that we think are different, but actually might struggle with the same problems. You know, I'm not going to prescribe to people that like travel the world and you learn whatever. But what I do want to prescribe to, man, just like broaden your circle. Get out your circle, and build these bridges as much as possible. Like I said, there's so many similarities that we found in these conversations that we've had. And for me, the application about as far as masculinity is concerned, it has to be transnational, number one. Yes. The conversation has, because we're going to run into each other in different places. Like one day we're probably going to be immigrants in another country. I don't know, probably, I don't know. It's whatever, whether for study or for work. That's how humanity works, is that we go where we're happy, where we seek opportunity and things like that. And the thing I like about this conversation and the ones that we've had before is the fact that it gives us that blueprint to be able to exercise healthy masculinity no matter where we are, and no matter who's around us. So for me, the application from all of this is remain consistent wherever you are, because like the one thing that I don't know, the one thing that I relate to Gabe with, for example, is again when you're in academic circles and then as soon as you leave them, you step out and all of a sudden you're like, it's almost like you don't have your superpower anymore. You know, you're surrounded by everyday dudes, but you can't do it. You can't even hold them accountable. Like some guys you can't even hold accountable because they don't want to be held accountable. So yeah, but for me, this theme, really bringing it to a close, has taught me the importance of being consistent no matter what our context is, because it is going to be difficult. But we've had 3 conversations with 3 phenomenal dudes who've shown us that no matter where we are in the world, we can show up for ourselves. Number one, I like the therapy thing. Wherever you are, go to therapy, right? But most importantly, we can be healthy for women wherever we are. And that's been a huge takeaway on my side. So
I just want to say thank you to you guys. Because oftentimes we may not be able to hold each other accountable out there. Right? But if someone does stumble upon your podcast, you give voice to some of the things that they may be feeling but may not know how to express.
Yeah.
And in terms of getting to that point of holding each other accountable and those conversations more broadly, this is a perfect starting point. So I thank all 3 of you for that, just to keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
It's amazing work.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Gabe. Thank you so much. And we've learned so much from you, man. We've learned so much from you. You know, so it's really important, man. And I really like what you said about new media as well. I mean, Chimamanda, when I read Half of a Yellow Sun, again, never seen a young black man described and given so much human complexity as she did in that moment. And, you know, feminists really do that for us, you know what I'm saying? And those kinds of things. So, you know, thank you also for alluding to those kinds of things, just to remind the gents, you know what I mean? So, yeah, man, you know, just to give everyone, you know, shout outs who've really been appreciating or helping us, put together this podcast, you know. So big shout out to Mohale for all our branding, all our marketing related stuff. Shout out to Luyolo, who's been doing all our video production in the back end. You know, she's the one that has to sit through these long recordings and long episodes and kind of like hear us talk nonsense the whole time.
Evidence.
Yeah, she can, you know, Luyolo also, man. You know, shout out to Tato Mutsusi, who's being behind also from a technical production, audio production point of view as well. Tabo Masilela, who's here in in the booth, was in charge of our overall production as well. And really big shout out to you, Gabe, man. Really appreciate you coming here, making the time, just having such a healthy, beautiful conversation with us. And everybody that watches, man, shout out to you guys who really want to unlearn. This is not a fun podcast. Like you here to work, actually. You're not here, to pass time, to be very honest with you. So we really appreciate when you actually click play on the links themselves. So guys, remember to, click subscribe and like our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts in general. Like and subscribe our YouTube channel as well. Spread the gospel, share the love, share the links, share the video snippets everywhere. Tell the people what's going on. And I think for us, really, the only important thing besides learning and unlearning toxic masculinity is people, making sure that their reviews are 5 stars only.
Come on. Let me tell them what happened.
Do you understand? So,
Remember the last nigga who didn't like us, 5 stars?
Bro, remember that guy that didn't, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
You can't use a phone anymore.
Yeah,
you're
dude.
not allowed to.
You know what I'm saying? So we're very powerful.
In the comment section.
Yeah, we're very, very powerful. Yeah, just make sure, bro. Just make sure. All right, guys. Cheers.